Okay.
All right. So, Joe, what did you want to talk about?
Well, I wanted to talk about the both the delusion of religion and Bible, and also a little bit of Mormonism, a little
Hmm.
bit.
Sure. What is your experience with Mormonism?
Well, I was baptized when I was 12 years old. I'm still a member by record, but I do not try to affiliate myself with the Mormon Church anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm finally off their roster, but it took some effort for them to admit that, I was baptized at 8 years old, never went to service. Uh, I think once I went to an Easter Sunday thing and never went back because I said that I was 11 years old and I said that the pastor was lying. And my mother or grandmother slugged me in the stomach for questioning the guy behind the podium. So that was it. That was the extent of my Mormonism. I mean, people would ask me what my religion is, and I would say that my family is Mormon. And you could I thought that there was obviously going to be a but there, but people didn't understand that. If your family's Mormon, then you're a Mormon. That's it. There's no question because you are whatever your parents are. You're born that way. I've met people in this state, in Texas, who think that they're born Republican, that they're born into the Republican Party. It has nothing to do with your opinion on the policies. It's all tribalism, which is hugely frustrating for me.
I agree. Like I wasn't, uh, I'm not biologically related to any Mormons. I was adopted when I was 10, and when came out as atheist to my adopted family at the time, they kind of don't like I'm atheist. Like my real
How
dad,
old were you? How old were you when you came an atheist?
15.
15. Okay, that's
Like
pretty
I
young.
started,
So how did that happen?
well, I started having doubts when I was 13 because there were so many weird things about the church that really didn't make sense. Plus, like, I lost a very special family member of mine, my biological maternal grandfather. He was the world to me.
Uh,
And, like, my grandpa was kind of reluctant to let me join the Mormon church, but it was really my, at the time, adopted parents' call.
okay. So you had your doubts. That's the thing that I'm looking for details on. I mean,
Mhm.
I had doubts when I was 14. I remember getting into arguments with the Mormon missionaries. My mother had the missionaries come over to talk to me, and everything they said was knucking futs.
Yeah.
I mean, just I remember ridiculing them. I mean, so you're thinking that you're telling me that God has a body, that He exists everywhere and every when in the multiverse, but His arms only reach this far, and He has nipples, and He has lungs. What good are the lungs? I
Skin
mean, you go any
tone.
other planet except this one, those lungs are useless. And I said, why? God has genitalia for what purpose? And then they tell me the story about God taking a wife, and then yeah. So, and we could all become gods if you're married in the temple and you live a saintly life, and your wife lives a saintly life, and you never get divorced. Then you can become a god, and then your wife becomes part of your harem because she never becomes a god, because it doesn't work that way.
Like,
The closest you can get to godhood for her is that she remains 14 for the rest of eternity.
jeez.
That's Yeah, that seems to be the whole spiel there. And I remember saying, why does God have a body? I mean, what does He use it for? Does He keep it in a tarp in the garage? Is it just part of His collection? Because I mean, there's no point in having a body. And it was just obvious that there was no thought went into this religion, like, at all. I mean, if I'm just a little kid and I can see these huge glaring problems with it, then I mean, here's another example. And you may hear meowing, loud meowing. That's actually my parrot. So he pretends to be a cat, and so I kept meowing constantly.
Oh, I
Yeah,
thought it was a cat.
yeah, it's a parrot, and I was telling the. I'm sorry, now I'm distracted by the stupid bird. I forgot where I was going with that. Oh, I'm arguing with these people about it. Like this was when I was 14. It was like 1978, or thereabouts, and so this was before 77. Yeah, 1977. So this was just before the Mormon Church started allowing black members. You remember the black members were if there were
Yeah,
blacks were not allowed in the Mormon
yeah,
Church, and why a black person would ever want to join the Mormon Church is beyond me.
I agree.
So they have this thing about that black skin was the mark of Cain, and how did they come to that conclusion? They came to that conclusion because it was something that you would recognize from a mile away. And I'm like, and I was in high school, and I remember thinking, okay, I've got a black girlfriend, well, she's half black, and I didn't know she was black until I met her dad. Okay, and because everybody I knew was like half something else, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got a Japanese girlfriend, and how do we decide that that's that these are not traits that you can recognize a mile away? How did you arbitrarily come up with that that the black skin was it? Well, it's just because of their bigotry. There's no other reason.
I actually agree with that. And you said you wanted a little bit more details on how I started having doubts in the Mormon church.
Yeah,
Well, like
yeah, it's annoying, isn't it?
at first I thought it was a loud cat meow.
Yeah, parrots are like the worst pet to have when your job is podcasting.
I'll try my best not to be distracted by that. I'll admit it's
I'm gonna close this door and maybe that'll muffle it a little bit,
yeah,
though not perfectly. Go ahead.
there we go. So like I have a older uh, adopted sister, but she's transgender, so he's really my brother.
Okay.
He actually helped me kind of see the little bit of truths that I never knew about. Like he was explaining to me about these different things that were going on in the church, like why the Mormon bishop was all weird and stuff, and on how also women can't get the priesthood and all that stuff. At the time, I was just okay. Why does this matter? But in 2 years, from 13 to 15, I really started having doubts that helped me progress a little bit. Oh, by the way, if I have a vocabulary problem, I actually have autism, so bear with me a little bit.
Okay.
So, when I was around 15, and when I told my adopted parents that I was an atheist, they were not particularly too happy.
Yeah, my grandmother about went berserk.
Oh, like
Not that
my,
I was atheist, just simply that I wasn't Mormon. I went through a neo-pagan stage.
uh,
So I still believed, I mean, I didn't believe in a God anymore, but I thought there were scientific reasons to believe in other supernatural things like psionics and that sort of thing. And there are religious perspectives like Taoism. And in fact, Jedi is based on a combination of Taoism and Confucianism. So there are religions that you can have that are technically atheist in that there are no gods.
oh yeah, I did watch a video about that uh, actually last night. Hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah, on the Pratt list when you did the atheist states thing,
Hmm.
and crap, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry. I'm sure I did it.
Oh yeah, like I was gonna tell you that my real dad, he's the one who introduced me to the church when I was 8 years old, and he was heavily involved with it, but obviously he's not anymore. He wants no part of the cult anymore, and and he regrets every little bit of it. Like my brother and my younger sister, they never really were active in the church. I don't think they would ever want to go back. Like my biological mom, who I don't talk to anymore, she was also kind of racist. Like when I
Yeah, I
first,
saw a lot of that growing up.
my mom, she's only 21 years older than me. Pardon. And like when I told her that I was dating a black girl, she was not happy. But I contradicted
Yeah,
her.
my parents kind of did the same.
Oh,
Yeah, that was not a pretty scene.
I actually contradicted my mom with her advice. Always try out new things in life. And she's like, you had to use that on me, didn't you? I'm like, damn right I did. And that was the only time I ever dated a black girl. And it was an interesting experience. And
Okay.
yeah. And like, do you mind if I ask you some questions?
No, go ahead.
Um, what made you want feel like you needed to be a anti-theist? What made you came to that conclusion?
Um, I put lies in the same category as violence. That lies and violence are things that you shouldn't resort to unless it's a last resort, like a desperate self-defense kind of a thing, and maybe not excusable even then. And so, when you talk about creationism, which is my particular bane, you're talking about someone who has the appearance of an authority going into a classroom to lie to the students, to mislead and deceive deliberately in order to control how they think, in order to control how they vote. And so all of that is insidious. And even if it was just for the reason of I want to understand how things are, people say, well, I have the right to believe whatever I want. Yeah, you have the right to convince yourself that you're a tiger god if you want to. You can believe whatever the fuck you want to. For you don't have to justify why you believe that. But when you start telling other people that what you believe is actually true, now you've donned the burden of proof. And other people have a right not to be lied to. Now, if I go in and I teach a classroom, if I teach them evolution, I'll teach them factually what evolution is. If I get something wrong, then it's on me, and it should be. I mean, if you get something wrong, then you have to you have to correct for that. Um, but those people, I can't go in and tell them whatever they want to believe. I have to tell them what is. And if they don't want to believe it later, that's fine. You can go ahead and pretend that everything that you can verify yourself, you can just pretend that you can't really verify that, because that's what creationists always do.
Yeah.
You show them the proof against their position, and they ignore it. So they're going to believe in the magic book of fables, and that's just the way they are. But when you're dealing with that classroom, we're not indoctrinating according to their preferred religion. There are people there from various religions, and from no religion, and they deserve to be told the truth.
And I actually agree with you. Like I have ran into a few of those creationists, and what they say is it doesn't really make any sense in the slightest.
Yeah,
Like,
and a lot of times they know that. They know that I've had people admit to me a number of times that they know that what they believe is not really true, but they're going to believe it anyway because it makes them feel good. This is particularly true of the people who are formerly atheist, and people, they usually start out Christian in the United States. They usually start out Christian and then they become atheist, and then sometimes, on rare occasions, sometimes they'll go back. And I've interviewed a handful of people who do that, and the reason given always is just as vacuous as you can imagine. They see religion has an effect on the mind. It's linked to certain brain conditions, but it also produces endorphins, so it's very much like an addictive drug. And some people lapse back into their addicted drugs, and some people can switch from a chemical addiction to a religious addiction, and vice versa. They just switch back and forth. But the reasons are that they simply want to. There's never, or they always say that they do it for logical, rational reasons, but they can't produce one.
Right. I actually agree with what you're saying. Like these creationists, there we go. Um, they they may claim that this fact goes with this fact, or creationism versus evolution. Yeah, none of it really goes together. Like, was there a time in your life where you actually did believe in creationism?
No, no, I never believed in creation. My family had this tradition that you don't begin to indoctrinate a child until they're 8 years old, and this is completely against what normal indoctrination procedures are. I mean, like the old Jesuit saying, "Give me a child until he is 7, and I will show you the man." Because if you if you inculcate early enough, you could block all critical thought, so that that child may never develop the ability to think critically ever in the rest of their lives. But my family decided not to do that until I reached what they considered arbitrarily to be the age of reason. So, on my 8th birthday, my mother came in with a Bible and starts telling me how it's the absolute truth in the Word of God. But I had already seen cladograms in books about dinosaurs, because my second grade teacher gave me a book about dinosaurs, and it showed this picture about how all life is related, and all of that made sense. I mean, who can't tell that sheep and goats are more closely related to each other than either one is to cattle? And who can't tell that sheep, goats, and cattle are more closely related to each other than either is to dogs?
I agree.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk about the delusions of the Bible too, if that's okay.
Sure.
Like, for the longest time, like, people been wanting me to read the Bible again, which I'll never do. This one particular story that really didn't make sense, and I did all the research that I can possibly find for any evidence, and that's this supposed Noah's worldwide
Yeah.
flood thing. Like last week, I watched your playlist on disproving Noah's flood,
Yeah.
and you did make really great points about it, and about this rock formation allegedly being the remains of Noah's Ark, which is a complete hoax.
Yeah.
Like, what what in their right mind, logical mind, would believe that?
They are told, and none of this is rational, because you understand that every logical fallacy has been used as an argument for God, and every argument for God is a logical fallacy.
Yes.
And ubiquitous throughout religion is the question begging fallacy. So they just assume, and this is also a component of the God of the gaps fallacy. When you combine question begging with the arguments from ignorance and incredulity, you get God of the gaps. So we're not talking about people who are thinking logically. We're not talking about people who are thinking rationally. They can, given other topics, but most of these people were raised being told that you have to believe this, and if you and you have to believe hard enough, which means What does believe hard enough means? It means convincing yourself. You have to convince yourself this is true. And it seems circular also in that in order for you to think that you have to believe this, well, you already have to believe this to think that you have to believe this. But this is what are you going to do when people have been taught this since before their age of reason, and when they were just little kids? And this has been ingrained into them that there's one thing that they have to honor and obey, and that's the word of primitive people pretending to speak for God.
Like, the whole concept of the so-called global flood has really never made any sense to me. Even when I was a believer.
Even theologically, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes, logically and
No,
also
theologically, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And when I was around 22, I wanted to actually prove it was right at the time. Like,
yeah,
I was in a stage, I was like a deist or something.
Okay.
Wanted to actually, hey, what if this is true? I actually had huge doubts it was, but I wanted it to be true. So I tried to do all the research that I can about this supposed global flood. Nothing. No geographic evidence that ever happened of a worldwide flood according to what the Bible states. None of it has happened, and I'm actually convinced by that.
Now, I said that I wasn't a creationist. I always accepted evolution. I mean, just from my earliest memories, I never believed that God went abracadabra poof,
Yes.
and there are all these different things. But I do have to admit that as a child, I did believe in Noah's Ark, because absolutely every single adult I ever knew in my entire life were always creationists. I never met one person who wasn't a creationist until I was a teenager in middle school. And because of that, I thought that if people are lying to you, and creationists lie all the time. So one of the things that they tell me was that God is a conclusively proven scientific fact, and that it would be as absurd to question God as it would be to question whether we really have a president. And then I realized, well, it's actually possible that we don't have a president, and we're all just being lied to. But people who believe in conspiracy theories believe in a lot weirder stuff than that. But I thought that there was a global flood because everybody tells me that there's evidence of a global flood all over the world, because creationists lie, and there is no evidence of a global flood. And what I needed to have was my math teacher at that time, who was the first atheist that I ever met in my life. No, he wasn't a math teacher. His class was student and the law. So he was a law teacher in middle school. Go figure that out. I didn't understand why are we taking student and the law? But that was our middle school in Los Angeles area. Not Los Angeles proper, but we lived in one of the suburbs.
Oh.
Okay, so this guy, it was after class. There's nobody else in the class, fortunately, when I mentioned this. And I said something just in chatting with this guy as I'm gathering my stuff, when I mentioned Noah's flood, and he just laughed. And he said, there was no flood. It's impossible. There's no evidence of it. We have evidence against it. There's no way that this could have happened. And we know that it didn't happen, even if it could have. And he's laughing at me for being a stupid kid. And it didn't take me a full minute to realize that he's right. That there's no way for the entire globe to be flooded. Where the fuck did all the water go? Where did all the water come from? And look at all of the leaps and bounds of cognitive of contortion that you have to come up with to try to believe this ridiculous fable. And the fable means that God can't actually see the future like he's always saying that he can, because he keeps lamenting things that he's done. He has to keep going back and wiping the slate clean when he realizes, well, I made a mistake and I regret having done this. I got to start over again. That's not an omnipotent being. We're not an omniscient being.
Like the whole concept of the global flood will never make sense to anyone. I bet there's even some believers out there. Yeah, this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to continue to believe it because my religion said so that I should.
Yeah.
Like the whole religion thing just
That's another thing that throws me. I mean, I know so many Christians who have never cracked open a Bible, and they believe it because they're told to believe it. Well, how do you believe something you've never even read it? You know,
I didn't know.
shouldn't it be that you read it and evaluate it before you decide that it's convincing to you? You know, before you realize, hey, I guess I do believe this. That, but no. Instead, I'm told that they are. There are Christians out there that I've known for many years, who tell me that they're more moral than me because they're Christian,
Yeah,
and they're chain smoking, drug addicted, fornicating alcoholics on their third marriage and their fourth criminal conviction, but they're more moral than me because they're Christian, and they don't even know what that means. They don't know what a creed is. They have absolutely no idea, fuck all, about what the Bible says. Not a thing.
I'm a little bit surprised that you said not all Christians read the Bible. I didn't know that. So I learned something today.
You didn't know that not all Christians read the Bible?
Mm-mm.
I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where I'm told that the Bible says this or that, and I say no, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Okay, show me. I can't show you where. And the reason you can't show me where is because it doesn't say that. And then when I say something the Bible says, well, then I'm told that it doesn't say that. No, yep, but it does, and I can show you where it does. And then when I show them where it does, they say, well, it does. That's not what it means. Okay, well, first you said it didn't say that, and now you see that it does say that, and now it doesn't mean that. Well, what does it mean then? And you have to trade every word. So like if this word means that and that word means this, if you just assume that that's what these things are really secretly saying, then you can contort this sentence into saying something else, but only in this sentence, not when the word comes up in another chapter, only right here. So when you have some king saying that he's being hounded by people hunting him with dogs, and that the dogs are biting his hands and feet, if the translation doesn't say bite, if the translation says pierce, then people will say that part of that sentence is a prophecy, because it's talking about how Jesus had his hands and feet pierced, except that we're talking about a different guy in a different circumstance, and he's being bitten by dogs. And he says they're coming at him like lions. So this is not a prophecy. And the rest of the time that it says, if you ever find pierce in there, other than the one reference where they pierced his hand and feet, they're obviously not. It's not a prophecy then. So why is half a sentence a prophecy and not the whole thing? What the hell is a prophecy? A prophecy is supposed to be what tells you what is going to happen before it happens. So people should know this is the prophecy. It hasn't happened yet, but it's prophesied that it's going to happen, and there should be a time limit on it too. When is this supposed to happen, or by when is this supposed to happen? And then we'll know, the prophecy is fulfilled. But if you just got some vague thing that eventually it'll, in this normally warm area, it'll be below freezing by this time of the morning. Eventually there's going to be a time when those conditions are met. I mean, how does Jesus say that he's going to come back? How are we going to know when the end times are? Well, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, and he goes into a list of all these things that we have every day, that every single year since then and before then has met those criteria.
Like, so, I'm not sure if you ever heard of this another atheist YouTuber, Dark Matter 2525.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked to him before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I watched a lot of his stuff, and he's very good at what he does.
Oh, nice. Like, I remember this one video that he actually made about Jeffrey
doing the little angel with the marijuana leaf.
Yeah.
Okay.
And was it like this top 10 or whatever? I may be misremembering. I kind of a little bit of a bad memory. But he was mentioning about, well, why isn't Jesus stopping all this or whatever? There's rumors of wars, a bunch of nonsense, and all that stuff. Like
Hmm.
like Christians, they actually believe in all that stuff. Like I know it, and sorry if I don't make sense right now. That's part of my disability, so
It's all right.
bear with me.
I'm not noticing a problem, so don't worry about that.
Well, that's a first. Like people kind of judge me on my autism a little bit, so I'm thankful that you're not judging. And shit, what was I talking about?
Now that I share that problem.
Damn. Yeah, let's just talk about religion because I like bashing it. I don't remember what I was talking about.
Well, I want to hear more from you.
Oh,
Yeah. So
what
I
do you want
mean,
to know?
you've asked me questions, and I've talked a lot, but I really haven't heard much from you.
Okay. Well, I'm I'm 25 years old. I'm not. I'm a apostate of the Mormon Church, which I'm very proud to say. And I actually am a member of several atheist groups on Facebook. And I actually am a hardcore anti-Trump. And yeah, my birth my birth mother, she was raised in a Catholic family, and my maternal grandma, she is hardcore Catholic, and she ever watched this video, which I don't think she would ever. And she discovered that I'm atheist, she would probably disown me immediately. um, what else you want to know? You can ask me questions.
Well, no, I was gonna say you're. I was interested in hearing about your doubts, and you shared some of that.
Okay.
And you said that you wanted to talk about not just Mormonism but also religion. So I we haven't really heard your perspective on much of either one yet.
Oh, my bad. I kind of have a tendency to switch topics back and
No
forth.
need to apologize. I'm just what are your comments on Mormonism or religion in general?
Well, religion in general, I think it's very harming to the world, and I actually believe that it's the world's oldest scam and delusion
Yeah,
that it should go away, but more more peaceful way, no violence whatsoever. Like
yeah.
religion is
There's two definitions for anti-theism, and that is one of them. When you think that that one version of an anti-theist is somebody who believes that religion is a net negative.
then I guess I'm an anti-theist.
Well, there's another definition too, which is that an anti-theist has a positive belief that there is no God. It's not just that you lack evidence to convince you, but you're actually convinced there isn't one. So
Yes.
that's a harder decision to make. And I wouldn't call myself an anti-theist unless you meet both of those.
Like I don't believe any God exists, but I'll admit my favorite mythology is the Greek mythology because they're so cool. Anyway, my other comments about religion is that religion is always harmful. I don't think it is a mental illness, but it highly contributes to mental illness.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you're schizophrenic or if you're just various levels of irrationality can all be cloaked in a religious congregation. And Many religious or many mental delusions can also be bolstered and reinforced by that same congregation. So you're right.
Like, like for example, this is where I kind of like making fun of the guy since he's one of my ancestors. Like all the way back then, Catholic Pope is my many time great grandfather. He was Innocent the Eighth, and he was not so innocent since he had 13 children by 14 lovers. So
Well, it's good to be a pope.
yeah, okay, that's a good one. But
Yeah, well, popes have a notorious history. If you go back far enough, I mean, there's all kinds of things that are ascribed to popes now. You got orgies and venereal diseases
the
and all kinds of crap.
the most recent pope I'm descended from is Leo the 12th, and he was not a particularly good guy either. But yeah, like the whole concept of religion should just go because
Just out of curiosity, how would you define religion? When you say religion, what are you thinking?
basically a undying undying worship of a god or gods, like the Egyptian mythology, because there were so many different Egyptian gods that people worship. Pardon. um, like eventually that went all away, and in some ways, Egypt advanced a lot, and I'm not sure if that really answered your question though.
Well, I've obviously taken a lot of time to think about this, but my concept and my opposition to religion is that opposition or that religion is a faith-based belief system. And it doesn't necessarily have to include a God, though they typically do and usually do. A religion it always concerns an afterlife of some kind. So that we are always perceived to have a soul or something like that can continue on after we die, even if it just goes to Sheol, where our soul just remains in the underworld dead. So there's
Like,
always an aspect of like mind body dualism or something like that. But the biggest issue isn't the fact that they believe that there's a soul of some sort or that some essence of self continues on, whether it's reincarnation or what have you. The problem is the faith-based belief system. A belief system has required beliefs and prohibited beliefs, so that you have to believe this and you're not allowed to believe that, which is exactly the distinction between religion and free thought.
like when 3 days ago, I actually watched a video about you talking about is there life after death or something, and towards the end, you said that we had two choices if we were ever given that opportunity, and I made one choice, and if I had the opportunity to uh, repeat everything and but not move on at the end of that, I would actually choose that. So, because like I'll give the Mormon Church only one tiny bit of credit. This is something rare for me, but the I just a little idea of families being together
Mm-hmm.
is a good idea. Like we all want to be with our families forever, right? Like
Yeah.
like as an ex-Mormon, like you you can actually admit tiny it's a good concept. I'll I'll give the Mormon Church that. But other than that, nothing.
Well, it's not just the Mormon Church. I mean, every church, because it is it means of manipulation of the masses, then they want
Yeah,
everybody to think the same, and it's all got to be a hive mind kind of thing. Well, then there's obviously a lot of promotion of community. It's all about tribalism.
Like, when I was a Mormon, I used to actually believe in all that,
Mm-hmm.
but but when I was actually looking up more things and things I didn't even know about, I actually watched videos that were recorded inside of a Mormon temple. I'm not sure if you are aware of this, are you?
No.
Well, this another ex-Mormon YouTuber, new name Noah or something, he actually recorded uh, footage inside of the temple,
Okay.
and I never knew anything about that before, and all that rituals and stuff. That really gave me cringe worthy goosebumps because of all that creepy stuff.
I missed something. Can you say that again?
Oh sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So there was a video inside the temple. I didn't I didn't understand the rest of it after that.
oh, that there were these weird rituals going on, and
Okay.
um, that I had these movie like goosebumps because it was really giving me the chills, and I was like, "That's what I would have gone through. I would not want to be part of that."
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, like, shall we bash religion?
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little bit starstruck because you're one of my favorite YouTubers. So,
Well, thank you, but let's not get that way about it. Um,
so
I don't know how to take too many compliments.
well, you're welcome anyway. Well, like the whole idea of the whole Christian thing, like, will never make sense to me, or why
Yeah.
anyone could believe that some dude sacrificed himself in the name of his god, his dad, that turns out to be himself, and 3 days later he rose from the dead, which is not possible, and
Yeah.
still supposedly floating up in space to heaven after all this time. Like, what
Yeah.
what's your uh, versions about that?
I don't. The reason that people think that they have a soul,
Yeah,
and I did a speech about this last month, I think. The reason that people think that they have a soul is because they didn't know what air was, and they thought that air was spirit, and they knew that the movement of air would animate bodies because they didn't understand how breathing worked. And so they also noted that diseases happen when you sneeze or when you cough, and they realized that there's an infection traveling around. But the way that they thought that worked was that they thought that it was evil spirits. So that because right after you start sneezing, well, then that's when you start showing other symptoms of becoming sick. And so that's why people will say "bless you" when you sneeze. And then they thought that the clouds were the gods, or they thought that the columns of smoke rising out of the earth is gods. They thought that dust devils were literally devils because they would appear out of nowhere, throw everything around, and then disappear in evanescence. And of course, tornadoes. What the hell is a tornado but an angry god, right? So they thought they thought that the air was spirit, and then when eventually they start building a theology based on this, and so now they have this idea that your spirit looks like you somehow, like it's a version of you that people can see through. And now that they started thinking about this, then when they figured out what air was, they didn't realize that it's the same thing they've been talking about all along. Because now they're thinking that spirit is some image of you that wears ghost clothes and is see through.
I,
So yeah, so there's no truth to any of it. There's no God, there's no soul, there's no devils, there's nothing in the realm of supernatural exists at all. And that was a problem that I had to figure out. When I stopped believing in God, because I realized how deceptive religion was. I mean, people were. I had a friend who became an ordained fundamentalist Baptist minister, but when we were both teenagers and I became a reborn Christian, I asked him whether this is all real, whether this sense of euphoria and elation and everything is it real, or is it produced in my own mind, or what have you. And so he grabbed me by both shoulders with a huge beaming smile and said, just keep telling yourself it's Jesus until you believe it. So that's what faith was about. Keep lying to yourself until you believe it. And so that's when that was my last instant as a Christian. And I remember deliberating for days, is there some other version of God? If Christianity is just a lie, then maybe there's some other version of this deity thing. But God never seemed like a real answer. I mean, it's like, why would there be a God? That doesn't make sense to me. So I started looking into other religious perspectives and I started getting into neo-pagan spiritualism because I wanted direct experience of the supernatural, because I still believe there was a supernatural. I still believe that psionic ability. It seemed that everybody, even atheists, believed that mental abilities existed. I mean, that if you watch Star Trek, Spock can do the mind meld. You watch Star Wars, and Obi-Wan Kenobi can astral project, right? So yeah, everybody, even the atheist shows, believed in mental like psionics or what have you. And so I thought that was real. And there's all these pseudoscience claims about what people beyond the Iron Curtain were somehow able to do. And there's like the footage of people manipulating ball bearings around using the power of their mind and everything. So that was really big in the 70s. So I bought into it. And so I wanted to directly experience. I got into transcendental meditation and did all I could to experience astral projection and other means of mental aptitude, like telekinesis or whatever. And of course, it's just all absolute failure. And I spent years of trying to read auras and all of the things that the New Age spiritualists try to do before I realized that it's just another form of faith, just another form of fooling yourself. So there is nothing of the supernatural, not faith healing, not ghosts, not anything you can name that is commonly called supernatural. None of it is real.
I actually agree with you. Back to your earlier statement, like, I actually kind of believe that every single Christian denomination has their own version of the Christian God.
Yeah.
Like, Pentecostal has their version, the Mormon have their version, Catholic, so on and so forth. And like, they think that their Christian God is the more true God than the Mormon or the Catholic or something. I've actually been convinced of that for around 2.5 years now. And the weird vastness about it is, why do they think like that? Like, each of the Christian churches claim that they are the one true church. I even asked my adopted father why your church is claiming to be the true church while there's others out there claiming the same thing.
Yeah, so you being autistic are probably sensitive to the fact that you think differently than some other people.
Yeah.
And in this context, you and I are both in the same boat. I mean, we both think differently than religious people do. They think that they have to believe this thing, and that there is a thing called forbidden knowledge that they're not allowed to believe, and thus they're not allowed to understand things that they can't risk believing. because they can't allow themselves to doubt the thing that they have to make believe.
Yes.
So I've never understood the logic or the rationale of how you get to be religious. I was religious myself as a child because I was lied to and told that there's all this evidence that there isn't.
Like, I was religious, but at the same time, I wasn't, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I didn't believe in Christianity on
Yeah.
faith. I didn't know that that was required. I didn't understand what faith was. And when I understood what faith was, I realized how dishonest it is and why I had to reject it.
Like, I remember when I was around what, 9 years old or something, when I first came to my, at the time, foster parents, who later adopted me.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to this church in Utah that was kind of close by to the house. And
A church in Utah?
yeah, the
Okay.
Mormon church. And I
Was this like a family road trip?
no, it was at the time when I was living in Utah,
Okay.
like when I was still in foster care. And I remember like seeing these weird art things on the wall in the primary room. And I was actually thinking, what is all this? Even at 9 years old, I knew what is going on. Like, I'm kind of like one of those, I guess, early thinkers on how, I guess, on what my grandpa would have called me. Like, I always known about religion in some sense. At the same time, I didn't. If that makes
Well,
any,
you're a kid. I mean, and when is there a time that it's not a
yeah,
dichotomy? I mean, there's lots of things you don't know.
yeah,
Most believers don't know as much as a lot of non-believers do. And that doesn't mean that that you know versus you don't know, because there's plenty that I still don't know.
like, and also one of the key things that the Mormons were taught is that their general authorities are never paid. That's a lie. A big fat lie. Like, how do you explain all these fancy mansions and all that? And they get paid at least 120,000 a year or something.
Hmm.
And if I'm exposing the church, if I get excommunicated for it, I don't care. I actually be free. But yeah, and I'm boldly putting myself out there. But yeah. Well, thank you very much, Armin Ra.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Um, Happy to hear your perspective. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast now, and thank you very much.